The Khans of Agror. Chapter 2. They came from the rugged mountainous region of the lower Himalayan range, where in summer jagged peaks are mirrored in azure lakes, where pine forests cover the slopes, and where a flood of colorful wildflowers scent the air of lush green valleys. Here the winters are cold, triggering an almost hibernation reflex, while heavy snowfall sets off avalanches that block the narrow mountain passes. As if genetically modified by their environment, the people of this region are unmatched in their hospitality, which they extend to their visitors like the bounty and beauty of their summers, but reject, like the harshness of their winters, with a complete severing of ties, those whom they perceive as enemies. One thread in the fabric of the many tribes that populate the Gargan Valley of this region trace their ancestry back to Zoji, the one after whom the Zoji Pass was named. It is said that she was the daughter of a great Khan and the bride of the great warrior Sikandar. Later, Khan became the surname of all members of the tribes in that area when the British came and couldn't fathom how people could be identified otherwise. But in those days, before it became important to categorize and number people, she was simply Zoji Jan and her mother Gul Jan. The stories claim that Zoji was the untamable daughter of the chief of a clan of Pathans. An invincible rider, she would gallop away at will to her mother's dismay, at her own inability to discipline her daughter. She couldn't understand why Zoji was more enchanted with the sparkle of stars on a black velvet sky than the baubles and trinkets that the other girls in her tribe cherished. Zoji was 16 and past marriageable age, but was not yet betrothed, because most of the men in her clan felt they could not handle her. Though small of frame and slender in build, she could outwield any man with a sword. Zoji awoke one morning in early spring to the sound of rushing water. The snow on the mountains had begun to melt, creating fast-flowing rivulets and cascading waterfalls. She mounted her horse and rode out into the dawn toward her favorite spot along the top of a mountain ridge. Her spirit soared with the thudding of her horse's hoofs and the sting of the wind as it whipped against her face, tugging at her head veil till it slipped away. Here she disembarked and, kneeling by a brook, cupped her hands to take a drink. She was suddenly startled by the rhythmic echoing of marching feet through the valley below. Quickly, remounting her horse, she rode higher up the mountain to command a better view. The next instant, she clasped her hand over her mouth in an effort to stifle her exclamation of shock at the sight of a military column approaching through the narrow pass. The leader looked regal as he moved forward on his horse, leading a small group of cavalry ahead of the marching soldiers. The early morning sun tipped over the horizon, turning the white plume he wore in his helmet into a feathery flame, and glanced off the shields of the soldiers in flashes of golden light. What made her catch her breath was the magnificent black horse and the majestic poise and dignity of the rider. Sensing her presence by the intense scrutiny of her gaze, he suddenly looked up and caught sight of her. Frightened now that he had seen her, she turned and, urging her horse into a swift gallop, sped away, but he wasn't far behind. Filled with admiration for the skill with which she rode, he followed her till they both arrived flushed and breathless at the home of her father, the great Khan himself. The details here are lost, but it is said that Sikandar was so overwhelmed with the hospitality of his host and the beauty and daring of his host's daughter that he converted on the spot into a Muslim and married her. It didn't matter that Islam did not spread into this region till much later, for as the stories were handed down in the family, it became important to believe that the Khans had always been Muslims. So enamored was Sikandar with his young wife that he drew the ire of his companions who felt neglected by him. Zoji challenged his idea of what a woman was, and his fascination with her seemed to absorb his every moment. Ultimately, though, he was a man, but more than that, he was a warrior. There were battles to be fought, and the call of duty overrode his desire to always be with his wife. Soon the time came for them to part, and she tearfully bade him farewell, while he promised to return to her as soon as he was able. His eyes turned toward the mountains, and as his horse wound its way through the narrow gap between the steep rocky faces of the pass that had brought him to her, he named it the Zoji Pass. Neither of them knew at the time that she was carrying in her womb their son, the future great Khan Bahadur Shah. Zoji waited for Sikandar as the days, weeks, and months went by with no news of him. Then, in the slow manner with which messages were relayed in those days, she learned that Sikandar had not returned because on the long journey westward, a few months after he had left her, he had died. She could not believe this. She knew he would come for her, he would never break his word to her, and she would be waiting at the same spot he had first seen her. Wild with hope and fighting despair when he did not appear, she rode through the rugged mountains, her eyes searching for him, her long dark hair blowing in the wind, till the horse beneath her stumbled and lay still. Then she continued searching on foot, till her shoes were torn to shreds, oblivious to the cuts and bruises on her feet. She went on beyond the pass where she had first seen Sikandar. Her eyes grew dim with weeping and searching, and it was just as she felt her life ebbing away that she saw him riding towards her against the setting sun, the white star on the forehead of his black stallion radiating light. Then, as she had expected, he wordlessly picked her up in his arms and placed her on the horse before him. A silvery mist descended, enveloping them, and they vanished never to be seen again. Their son, Bahadur Shah Khan, grew up to become a powerful ruler in the region, and they say he lived to be almost 200 years. He was the direct ancestor of my grandfather, Nadir Khan. They're all gone now, but watered-down versions of the great Khan remain, scattered all over the world, blended into various gene pools. In late spring, even today, tiny red flowers called Zoji Pool speckle the path where Zoji's feet trod and bled on the sharp rocks.